Thanks, Gary. Okay, well, it's not unfortunate, it's very fortunate because she's not able to join us for the best reasons in the world. So Emma, and she's actually a role model. And again, for all the young ladies that they're listening today, the young engineers, Emma is on maternity leave. So she recorded when we approached her back in May. She was pregnant. She said she'd love to do it, but she wasn't sure whether she'll be able to deliver in person because I think her due day was in late August, beginning September anyway. So we said, why don't you pre-record it just in case? So she did that, and she is on maternity leave. I'm not sure if she's going to join us for the panel discussion this afternoon. Murad, do you know?
I am not sure. I hope she will.
Yeah,
no,
anyway, so
I'm not sure she will.
Yeah, it's fine. But anyway, like I said, she's got the best reason in the world to have, and that's her second child. So she's a full-time mother and a civil engineer and a wife, and she's got quite an impressive biography. So Emma is a construction director for the Metropolitan Police. And she is a chartered civil and structural engineer with over 14 years experience designing and delivering projects of all sizes in London and further afield. Emma works for the Metropolitan Police. So here is another career that doesn't cross your mind instantly when you choose a civil engineering career. And she's leading the construction, engineering and resilience projects which underpin the estate transformation strategy of Metropolitan Police. In 2017, Emma was elected to the IC Council prior to being elected to the IC Trustee Board, where she helped deliver the strategic direction of the IC set by members and the IC Council. Emma became a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers in 2019. She will join the IC's audit panel in December 2021. And outside work, Emma graduated in May in 2021 with an MBA from the University of Cambridge's Judge Business School. In June 2021, Emma was listed as one of the top 50 women in engineering for 2021. She's a mom of a 2-year-old, and yeah, at the time she wrote that, she was expecting her second child in August, and she has got her second child since. So yeah, so let's listen to the recording. So very commendable career, and another proof that you can be an engineer, you can be a mom of very, very young children, have a fabulous career. Thanks, Gary.
Hi there, my name's Emma Kent, and thank you very much for having me to speak to you today at your Chain Manchester event. I'm really sorry that I can't be speaking to you live, but I recently had a baby, and so for me it made more sense to pre-record my presentation to you to make sure that we weren't interrupted by a little one screaming or desperate to be fed or waking up or any of those kind of things. So let me just give you a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, I'll do a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to give you a bit of a career timeline, and that's going to be including my jobs and also how my involvement with the Institution of Civil Engineers has been a big part of my career so far, and how it's also influenced my career so far. I'm then going to talk about some career paths in construction rehab, and I'll actually talk a little bit about what that means and my experience and how that's woven itself through my career as a key theme. I'm then going to talk briefly about my extracurricular activities and a bit more detail about my involvement with the Institution of Civil Engineers and my professional development pathway as well. And then at the end, I'll just summarize with some contact details because not being speaking to you live today, I'm conscious that some of you might want to get in touch and ask some further questions or just have a chat about your own career. And I'm very happy to speak to anyone who wants to reach out like that. So a little bit about me. Well, I studied civil engineering at the University of Nottingham. I did the 4-year MEng program there. And that's obviously how I started my career in civil engineering, but traditional degree pathways, not the only way to start a career in civil engineering. There's loads of options out there now, like degree apprenticeships and, different routes into the profession through on-the-job training. I'm a chartered engineer with the Institution of Civil Engineers, and I'm also a chartered engineer with the Institution of Structural Engineers. I've had experience as a contractor. I did a year in industry with Costain, which is a very large infrastructure contracting company, and I've also had a lot of experience working as a consultant. I've worked for 3 different consultancy firms, and my current role is working as a client, and I moved client side when I joined the Metropolitan Police. I've also recently graduated with an MBA, that's a Masters of Business Administration from the University of Cambridge. I attended the Cambridge Judge Business School, which is part of the university, and I undertook my MBA as a part-time program over the course of 2 years. I must have been completely crazy because I signed up to do that just after my first child was born, and I graduated just before my second child was born. And that brings me nicely on to the fact that I'm mummy to 2 amazing children. I've got Chloe, she's 2, and I've got Arthur, who's only 2 months old now. Outside of work, I absolutely love the outdoors. We've got a running buggy, so I love running, I love walking, just basically being outside with my family. But also I enjoy kind of some quieter things. I love making, and I'll have a go at making anything. But particularly I love sewing, I love crafts, like making my own cards and things like that. So here is a little potted history of my career, which I've tried to do as a bit of a timeline, so you can kind of see how the last 19 years has gone for me. So I did my A-levels in 2002, so that gives you kind of a bit of a picture of how old I am, which is ancient compared with you lot, I'm sure. So in 2002, after I'd done my A-levels, I went to do a year in industry with Costain. That was just a fantastic experience, and I'll talk a little bit about one of those projects when I come on to talking more about construction rehab. But the year in industry program really helped set me up for university. I did a degree in civil engineering at the University of Nottingham, as I mentioned before. And whilst I was there, I had a scholarship from the Institution of Civil Engineers called the Quest Scholarship. When I was in my second year of university, a friend of mine suggested that I applied for the Royal Academy of Engineering Leaders Scholarship Programme, and I applied and I was successful. That is a multidisciplinary scholarship, so whatever discipline of engineering you decide to pursue, you could consider applying for that scholarship. And that's fantastic because it gives you networking opportunities, it gives you opportunities to travel abroad, it basically gives you a scholarship that you can then spend on your own professional development based on a kind of personal plan that you put together with a mentor. So it's a really, really valuable scholarship. I graduated in 2007, and using the Engineering Leaders Scholarship, I then undertook a 3-month trip around Asia. So I joined Bureau Happold's graduate programme in early 2008, once I'd returned from that trip. And in late 2008, I was privileged enough to win the Institution of Civil Engineers Graduate of the Year Award, which again, you know, further cemented my relationship with the Institution of Civil Engineers, which started with my Quest Scholarship. So I worked for a few years for Bureau Happold, and then whilst I was working for Bureau Happold, I was seconded to Taylor Thompson Whitting in Sydney. I spent 2 years in Sydney, and then I spent some more time traveling. I took a little sabbatical for a few months, and continuing my relationship with the ICE, I worked with the local members of the ICE to establish a graduates and students committee in New South Wales, where Sydney is. And I worked with a guy called Jonathan Durnell, whom some of you might know through the ICE already. And yeah, we established that committee there. And whilst I was in Sydney, I became a chartered engineer. I was one of 6 people to sit my professional review that day in Sydney, because you know, it's a bit of a smaller membership there, but you can do your professional review at a broad number of cities all across the world. And now that professional reviews are online, you can probably do it from pretty much anywhere. So that's fantastic. In 2013, I returned to the UK, and I was still working for Bureau Happold because I'd been seconded into Sydney. And in 2014, I was successful in passing my exams to become a chartered structural engineer with the iStruct as well. 2015 saw me move to a different consultancy, Cundall, Johnston and Partners, or Cundall for short, and continuing to be involved with the ICE. I was elected to the Council of the ICE in 2017. Then in 2018, I changed jobs again and I moved across to the Metropolitan Police, where I work now, which is a client-side organisation, and I am their construction director. In 2019, I was elected to the trustee board of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And also that year, I was elected as a fellow of the ICE, which I was super proud of, because I became a fellow of the ICE before I was 35. And I'm one of only 273 female fellows as well. So it was a double whammy for me. And as I mentioned before, in 2021, I graduated from my MBA at the University of Cambridge. And I will also be joining the ICE's audit committee later this year, who have the role of basically deep diving into any activity that the ICE undertakes, just to see how effective it is, how well it spends the funds of the charity, whether it's in the members' best interest, whether it's in the public's best interest. Basically, it's to help assess the effectiveness of the institution. Right, so construction rehab. I've basically called my talk this because I realized that one of the key themes that has become apparent throughout my whole career is the creative reuse of existing buildings and existing structures. And so for me, that is basically rehabilitating existing buildings. So calling it construction rehab seemed pretty obvious to me. And it's really an issue that's kind of at the forefront of the agenda in the construction industry at the moment. So you might have seen some of the press over the last couple of years that's basically focusing on never demolishing a building again. So with the climate change agenda and with COP26 coming up, I think the key point is that actually, if we keep knocking down buildings, then we're not making the best use of the embodied carbon that we've already expended in creating those buildings in the first place. And actually, there's a strong argument for reusing and retrofitting the existing stock of buildings that we've got. And so this has kind of been a real theme that I've enjoyed throughout my career. And repurposing existing buildings and making them more sustainable and fit for purpose for the 21st century has been something that has been pivotal throughout the whole 20 years of my career so far. So the way that I'm going to go through this talk will be to basically pick some of those highlights of construction rehab and show you and talk to you a little bit about how that interfaced with the rest of my career. So my first job. I mentioned that I did a year in industry with Coste, and my first project with them, well, my first major project with them was the King's Cross St Pancras station. And probably a lot of you were very small children in 2003, so you might not know what King's Cross station was like before. But basically, when they started to construct the Channel Tunnel rail link into St Pancras station, they realised that the capacity and the people flow through King's Cross was just not working. And so there was a major master plan done for the site, which was undertaken over a period of, I think, 6 or 7 years to provide new tube ticket hall facilities and to increase capacity at the station. The project that I worked on was the Western Ticket Hall, which you can see in the 2 photographs on the left there. And that is the area marked in yellow for the Metropolitan, Circle and Hammersmith and City lines in the bottom map of the station. So for those of you who know the station, it's basically underneath the Euston Road, immediately in front of the historic St Pancras station building. And the reason this is kind of an interesting construction rehab project is because we were threading this new tube ticket hall, which, as you can see, is a very modern and user-friendly facility, into a listed building next to an extremely busy highway. And so this kind of rehab element of it was to preserve and reuse the heritage elements of the building, whilst providing something modern and fit for purpose as a tube station for King's Cross. So that was kind of my first taste of rehabilitating old buildings and turning them into something that was kind of useful and fit for purpose. So moving on, my next project that I've selected was actually quite a few years later, but remember that I also undertook my degree during that time, and I didn't graduate till 2007. Was the next project was Exeter University Forum, and this was a project that I worked on for the first couple of years actually of my career with Bureau Happold. And again, this was about threading new buildings in between old buildings to breathe life into existing structures. So their site was on a steep slope, and at one side of the slope was the library for the university, and at the other side of the slope was the Great Hall of the university. And what we did was build this amazing timber bridge shell structure in between the two buildings, as well as refurbishing those existing buildings to provide a new student services centre, which is what you can see in the third picture there, and also to provide new seminar rooms and new teaching spaces and a new auditorium. So as well as like refurbishing the library and the Great Hall, we also were able to provide some new spaces in there as well. So this was kind of a rehabilitation that was about joining the old and the new to really amplify the effectiveness of the space and to refurbish the existing building. So again, much like King's Cross Station, it was about providing a fit for purpose building whilst reusing the existing assets. And if you look really, really closely on that left-hand picture, I'm standing there above the T of exceptional when I visited the project some years after it was completed, actually. So moving on, as I mentioned in my career timeline, I undertook a 2-year secondment to Taylor Thompson Whitting in Sydney, Australia. And I did a mix of projects there. They seem to do a little bit more new build projects in Sydney, which is probably because they've got more space. So land is less of a constraint than it is here. And also, I think this is not meant to be a direct criticism, but the climate change agenda is not as important in Australia as it is here yet. But society and times are certainly changing there, and there's a lot more public pressure on government and on builders and landowners and everything to respond to climate change more robustly. So this project was the Commonwealth Bank building, which is in Martin Place in the centre of Sydney. It's a really, really famous building in Sydney, so the pressure was massively on. It's not just a famous building in Sydney, actually, it's a famous building in Australia in general, because in the 1980s, when children were opening bank accounts with the Commonwealth Bank, they were all given a money box in the shape of this building. And I actually have one of those money boxes because my dad's Australian, and I had one of these money boxes given to me when I was a child. And so I actually had a money box of the building that I was working on. So this Commonwealth Bank building is a real icon, and that really amped up the pressure, to be honest. And so what we were trying to do with this building was to basically increase the capacity of the building by putting on a couple of extra floors onto the top of the building, which you can see there in that kind of glass structure that's sitting over the roof in the middle there. But also in the left-hand image is, you can see that big light well and that big glazed roof light over the top of the center of the building. And that was the second purpose of the project. So as well as increasing capacity, we wanted to increase the amount of daylight that was accessing the middle of the building. So the building had a light well already down the center of it. And if you look at the columns on the left-hand image, again, you can see they're kind of L-shaped like this. And that's because the vertical portion of those columns was actually the original column that was holding up the edge of the light well. And so the reason that they're L-shaped is because we actually cut back the light well. So we actually reduced the size of the floor plate to increase the size of the light well, But by using those kind of outriggers, we actually reused the existing columns that were there with some pretty hefty structural modification and strengthening in order to allow those columns to take an offset load like that without any restraint from the floor plate. So my role in that project was right from the very, very beginning of the project, where I was involved directly in surveying the existing building and undertaking all of the calculations to assess the capacity of the existing structure. So it's a really fascinating project because I was kind of really heavily involved in working out how we could actually undertake this project to increase the floors by putting 2 extra floors on the building, and to cut back this light well to form this new space inside the old building. And we did loads of other stuff there as well. For example, it became a very, very sustainable building. It was one of the first buildings to receive Green Star accreditation in Sydney that was actually a heritage, like a listed building. And yeah, as you can see, there was also a lot of other modernization works that went on in there. For example, threading 2 new glass lifts down through the center of the building to increase accessibility in this kind of old building that wasn't particularly accessible for its users. So that was a really fascinating project, really scary project, but as you can see, it turned out extremely well, and the occupants were very happy, and it won an awful lot of awards in Australia as well. So moving on, this project is actually probably one of my favorite projects that I've ever worked on. And it's probably one of the projects that most shaped my career, and that is Here East. So for those of you who know the Olympic Park, this project, Here East, was the rehabilitation of the Olympic Media Centre from the 2012 London Olympic Games. And the reason I love this project, well, there was a couple of reasons. Firstly, I think the end product is absolutely fantastic. The space has been completely transformed. That end of the Olympic Park was absolutely dead. No one ever went there. There was nothing, no reason to go there. There was nothing there apart from a multi-story car park and a derelict Olympic Media Centre. And now it's absolutely thriving. There's BT Sport have it as their main studios. Loughborough University have a campus there. UCL East has a campus there. There's a Wayne McGregor dance studio there. There's a data centre there. There's an innovation centre there for small businesses. There is just so much going on there. There's a huge number of bars and restaurants have opened up on the canal side there, and it's just, in terms of breathing new life and rehabilitating that area, it has turned it from completely derelict into an absolutely thriving and bustling corner of Hackney Wick and the Olympic Park. So that's a real reason to love it. But also there was a networking element, and I'm going to come on to that in a little bit, about how networking is important for your career and your professional development. And yeah, this project provided me with some of the contacts who I'm still working with now and who've helped to shape my career as it has continued from this project. So moving on, I also worked on 11 and 12 Floral Street, which was once I'd moved from Bura Happold across to Cundall. And this one was really interesting because this grade 2 listed building in the center of Covent Garden. And so rehabilitating this building had kind of 2 really tricky elements to it. First of all, it was a listed building, and therefore the owner of the building had a real duty of care to make sure that the building was preserved. And secondly, it was a very tight site from a logistical perspective, because it was right in the center of Covent Garden, and there was 16 adjoining properties, which made it a really complex project to both plan and implement. And that's kind of one of the aspects of it that I found so very interesting, was how to actually deliver this project whilst in the middle of the city. And so that meant thinking much more carefully about the size of different elements that we did, how noisy it was to do demolition works, using different methodologies to undertake the work that we needed to do. And so that kind of gave it a really unique angle when I was working on it. Plus, of course, the listed building factor meant that we had to be even more careful about what we did in order to preserve the key elements of the building. And this project was called a white box. So basically we presented it back as it was on the right-hand side there. So it's completely opened up, got the new light wells in. The space is essentially a blank canvas for an occupier to come in and use the site. One of the occupiers was Kent and Kerwin, which is David Beckham's fashion company, who came in with a shop there. And then the big space on the right there is now occupied by Peloton, the bicycle-based fitness company. So really interesting job. And that brings me on to my current role, which is rehabilitating London's police stations. So I can't really show you too many pictures inside the projects, although there's a lovely picture there of the inside of Twickenham police station whilst it was undergoing its refurbishment. And as you can see, that is actually demolishing an old custody suite to make space for lockers and new facilities for the police officers who use that site. And I included the top left picture almost as a bit of a joke, because pretty much the week after we finished redeveloping Edmonton police station, this person decided to drive his car into the front of the police station that we literally just repainted, and then try to set fire to it. As you can also see from the picture, our project was successful insofar as he was unable to insert his car into the police station and just did some superficial damage to the outside of the door. So our physical security design was clearly quite successful in that rehabilitation. And what's really interesting about this program of works is that the projects on it are just so different from each other. So bottom left is Charing Cross Police Station, which, as you can see, is kind of very beautiful, and again another important heritage building right in the middle of central London, versus on the bottom right there, which is the newest building that we refurbished, if you see what I mean, which is about 30 years old, which is Colindale Police Station in North London. So the challenges with those two projects were completely different, and the design skills required and the thinking required to rehabilitate those two sites was completely different. So it's never a dull moment on this program of works. We're actually redeveloping about 30 police stations across London, and that's in support of a new method of policing London, a new arrangement of how police officers operate, which was brought in about 3 years ago. And this is to provide them with the real estate that's needed in order to actually deliver their roles more effectively. And we're also got a big program to deliver a much more flexible working space. So there's a big focus on smarter working and on delivering open plan, flexible working spaces. So we've been very careful to try and deliver that in a similar way across the estate by producing a workspace design guide, which has been my baby for the last 3 years, to ensure that we try and provide consistent space, so that when you go into different police stations, you can navigate that space easily, and you can find a place to work or a place to hold a meeting or whatever facilities you need in a really consistent and straightforward way across the estate. We're actually, the development program is about £500 million across 5 years. So it is a really, really big program of works, and it relies on all sorts of relationships that we've developed with a framework of contractors and consultants. And so that's what makes this particular rehabilitation program so interesting, is that it's really based on strong relationships. As the client, my strong relationships are with the consultants, with the contractors, so delivering work with and through other teams, but also with our end users, because we have to engage really closely with the people who are going to be using these facilities in the future, as well as making sure that we don't disrupt them too much in the present whilst we're doing this rehabilitation work, because all of these buildings have remained occupied. So that's another element of this interesting challenge. So I said I was going to come on to some of my extracurricular activity and how that's kind of woven a thread through my career as well. So I mentioned before that I was an ICE Quest scholar. So the learning from that is get involved with your institution early, in my case, the ICE. I also had a RANG, Royal Academy of Engineering Leaders Scholarship at university, which provided me with great networking opportunities, as well as my first job, which I got after basically my job at Bureau Happold. I met the managing partner of Bureau Happold at a Royal Academy of Engineering dinner, and he invited me to apply for a summer placement there, and the rest is history. So the picture on the bottom right there is me as the winner of the ICE Graduate of the Year award in 2008, which gave me some really great exposure, as well as being on the cover of New Civil Engineer magazine. I then got involved with the proceedings of the ICE, so that's the journal of the ICE, with their editorial panel from 2009 to 2017, and that really got me known at the Institution of Civil Engineers and got me to know some of the key players at the institution as well. As I mentioned before, I also was a rep for the Graduates and Students Committee for New South Wales. And when I came back to the UK, I ran for election to ICE Council and was elected from 2017 to 2020. I became part of the Nominations Committee, which selects the president of the ICE from 2018 to 2020. So I helped to select 2 presidents for the ICE. And I was also part of the trustee board from 2019 to 2020. And as I mentioned, I'm about to join the ICE Audit Committee. So you can really see that my extracurricular activity, a lot of which has been with the Institution of Civil Engineers, has been this common theme throughout my whole career. So I've worked at 4 different places, but throughout all of that time, I've been involved with the Institution of Civil Engineers. And sometimes when I'm looking for a sounding board, when I'm applying for a new job, or in fact, when I've been sought for a new job, those contacts at the Institution of Civil Engineers have been really pivotal in helping me find those roles and get prepared for those roles. So I'm going to give you a call to action now, based on what you've heard today from all these different engineers and from myself as well, because I think there's at least 5 things, probably a lot more, but there's at least 5 things that I would call upon you now to do to help your professional development. First is join your institution, the relevant one for your career, as a student or as a graduate member. That's just a no-brainer. It's probably free or very inexpensive, depending on which institution you're with. Get involved with your local graduate and student committee. They will be having events, they will be doing things at your university or in your first job, and volunteer for a role. It is a fantastic way to meet people and to get some experience, to get some CPD, and to kind of boost your CV a little bit. I would also say enter some competitions and awards. I won a couple. I don't think I'm particularly exceptional, although I did stand above that sign that said exceptional on Exeter University Forum. But, you know, you've got to be in it to win it, right? So you need to get involved. You need to put yourself forward for this stuff. You need to get your name in the ring. Even if you don't win, you're still going to get great exposure. So there's loads of different awards out there. It might be for doing a good paper about a technical subject. It might be for doing some voluntary work. It might be because you're a bit of a rising star. So get involved in competitions and awards. Fourth, I would say you need to get involved in some voluntary work. So whatever interests you, you could do schools visits to talk about engineering careers or to talk about STEM subjects. You could do pro bono work, working with charities. You could do research, working with university or, you know, within your own business. There might be volunteering opportunities as well. And obviously, as I said before, volunteering with your local institution is also a really great way to you know, to undertake some voluntary work. And the final thing is attend events from your institution, because it's a really brilliant way to network. It's a really brilliant way to meet more senior members of the profession, to get your name out there, to kind of get some exposure, and to also learn, to find out about projects, to understand new technical concepts, to meet people who've done something interesting. So attend the events that your institution hosts, and you know, and I think that's a final sort of really useful springboard for your career. So in conclusion, I've talked about one aspect of civil engineering as a career path, and I think it's worth mentioning that there's loads of career paths that you can undertake with a civil engineering degree. You can do civil infrastructure engineering, you can do structural engineering, geotechnical engineering, which is kind of ground and foundations and geology and all those kind of things. fire engineering, you can specialize in bridges, you could go into construction and project management, you could go into management consultancy, and you could go into real estate or property. And in fact, my career has kind of spanned across multiple of those. I would say I've been involved in structural engineering, project management, advisory, and real estate. So you might have a career that kind of zips across different parts of the profession. And that's kind of what I meant by the jungle gym approach to your career, rather than thinking of it as a ladder. So the Institution of Civil Engineers supports all aspiring civil engineers across all of those career areas. And so if you're interested in any of them, I would urge you to check out the ICE and think about getting involved and joining as the relevant membership grade according to whether you're a student or a graduate, or ready to become chartered. I'm really, really happy if you want to contact me after this talk. I'd be very happy to do an in-depth chat if there's very specific things that you want to ask me, or if you've just got a quick couple of questions, then you're very welcome to send me an email, or you can add me on LinkedIn. If you add me on LinkedIn, please, 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 please just pop a little explanation in about who you are when you do the contact request, so that I know you've listened to this talk. If it's a really short question, you can tweet me, because I do love going on Twitter. And yeah, my email is emma_kent@hotmail.com if you want to just get in touch directly. So thank you very much for listening. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my talk. Again, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to be there to join you for this, but I hope that you have a really interesting and productive rest of your day. And I look forward to hearing from some of you in the future. So I'm going to stop recording now, but enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.